In the words of my childhood hero CJ,
"Oh shit, here we go again."
There is a new trend in software engineering that I have been desperately trying to ignore, mostly because every explanation of it contains the same buzzwords we are sick and tired of. At this point, whenever I hear words like autonomous agents, loops, harnesses, or vibe orchestration, I just want to throw away my laptop, move into the forest, build a bunker, and raise chickens. But, sadly, we still need to stay in touch with whatever new crazy idea our managers are going to discover on LinkedIn, and software factories are the word of the day. The basic idea is simple. Say you have an unlimited budget, and your only goal is to make Sam and Dario reach the trillionaire status. Well, in that case, instead of having an entire human team sitting around building software by hand, like in the Dark Ages, you build automated pipelines where AI agents pick up work, write the code, test it, review it, and eventually ship it with as little human involvement as possible. Naturally, some people already believe this is the future of software development, while others think the entire idea is fundamentally broken. Annoyingly enough, Cloudflare just published one of the better examples I have seen, showing that at least some version of this concept can actually work. The team created a so-called software factory for Astro and used it to reduce the project's open GitHub issues from more than 200 to around 30. Their goal is to eventually reach zero open issues for the first time in Astro's more than 5-year history. So, in this Monday morning review, we'll look at what these software factories actually are, why some pretty smart engineers think they fundamentally cannot work, and why Cloudflare's experiment with Astro might show us what the useful version of this idea actually looks like. Jokes aside, the basic software factory idea isn't particularly complicated. Humans decide what should be built and put the work somewhere like GitHub or Jira. Agents pick up those tickets, modify the code, run tests, and create pull requests. CI checks the changes, another agent or some deterministic system reviews the output, and eventually the code gets merged and deployed. Production then generates logs, telemetry, user feedback, and new issues, which become inputs for the next iteration. You basically turn software development into a loop, or, how I like to call it, a Dario money printing machine. Quick side note, this agent-human collaboration medium is already crowded, and famous tech founders are already creating chat apps they market as Slack killers. The controversial end of this idea is what people call a lights-off or dark software factory. Agents write essentially everything, humans stop reading the code, and the system relies on tests, sandboxes, permissions, monitoring, and other guardrails to decide whether the generated software is acceptable. And there is one fairly obvious reason people want this. Agents can generate code much faster than humans can realistically review. You can give 10 coding agents 10 independent tasks and have 10 pull requests waiting for you before you finished watching this video. And since the bottleneck moved up the chain from writing code to reviewing it, the next logical step for people obsessed with the 10x productivity goal is to automate the review process as well. The problem is that reviewing software is a lot more complicated than checking if some test turned green. Tests and linters can't reliably tell you that an agent just took a perfectly understandable codebase and added 6 abstractions, 3 unnecessary interfaces, and a factory inside your software factory because somewhere in its training data it found a Java tutorial from 2012. And this is pretty much the argument made by Dex Horthy, the CEO of HumanLayer, in a 3-part series appropriately titled Why Software Factories Fail. Before you dismiss him as another AI skeptic looking to leave the world behind, build a bunker and raise chickens, HumanLayer is building tools for developers working with coding agents, and his team actually tried running something very close to a lights-off software factory themselves. In short, the experiment worked pretty well while the agents were dealing with relatively straightforward tasks. But eventually, they ran into harder problems that the agents could not solve, and humans had to jump back into a codebase they hadn't properly followed for months. And that's when the job becomes pretty shitty. You are no longer trying to solve a bug, you are forced to understand all the architectural decisions the agents had made while slopping tens of thousands of lines of code. If I'm being honest, I can barely understand the code I wrote on my own 3 months ago, so having to debug and understand code written in bulk by an agent is literally one of my worst nightmares next to being forced to program in PHP. Dex's broader argument is that this problem starts much earlier with the way coding models are trained and evaluated. Most coding benchmarks are very good at figuring out if the generated solution works or not. You give the model a task, it writes some code, tests are executed, and if everything passes, congratulations, the model gets a gold star, and somewhere somebody decides we need to build another data center. We all know that for the past year the industry has been pretending that we don't have to care about whether the code is understandable, whether it fits the architecture, whether somebody can extend it 6 months from now, and whether fixing one bug today quietly creates 5 horrible design decisions that you will have to solve by hand 2 years from now when tokens will be more expensive than the developers we fired to save money. The reality is that coding and software are still not solved problems. And this becomes even more obvious when you look outside the software engineering bubble. Luke Dickens spent years doing AI research at Zynga and later worked on AI R&D and governance across Take-Two Interactive. For context, Take-Two is a small video game company who recently got $3 billion in pre-sales when they announced GTA 6. Luke's entire team was laid off a few months ago, and in a recent interview with 80 Level, he gave one of the more interesting assessments of where this whole AI automation story currently stands. His basic point is that the magic button executives keep imagining, where you feed requirements into one side and the finished product magically appears on the other, simply doesn't exist in any generalized meaningful way. What does work is much less exciting. Think of generating unit tests, documentation, boilerplate, and handling repetitive tasks where usually a statistically average solution is perfectly fine. And that distinction is pretty important for software factories, because there is a massive difference between using an agent to automate some boring work inside a pipeline and making the agent responsible for the pipeline itself. But there is also the money problem, and this is where things get a little awkward. Dickens described the current cost structure of production AI as a 5-alarm fire. His argument is that we are still using these systems during a period when the companies building them are heavily incentivized to make adoption cheap, while businesses are simultaneously deploying them without properly measuring the value they actually create. We have already seen what happens when some of those economics start changing, with GitHub Copilot's shift toward usage-based pricing, or with stories like Uber, who burned through its entire 2026 budget for AI coding tools in 4 months. And this matters a lot more once you start building software factories. A developer occasionally using Claude to quickly generate some functionality is kind of manageable. But you can easily get to financial ruin with a software factory that has agents running continuously, reading repositories, generating code, executing tests, asking other agents for reviews, and then repeating the entire process whenever something fails. At the end of the day, however, I still think that nobody has any idea where all this AI stuff will actually land. I'm somewhat of a skeptic which accepts that LLMs are useful tools in a lot of situations, but then I see comments such as this one, and I realize that some people are fully on board the AI hype train. For context, I got this comment on my Tiger-style video where I was arguing that code quality still matters. Don't get me wrong, I get my fair share of negative feedback on YouTube, and AI is usually a polarizing topic, but it really baffles my mind that people think that in a future where most of our jobs will be automated, we'll get the chance to sit back, relax, and just enjoy being alive. I don't know about you guys, but usually I require food and shelter in order to stay alive, and I'm not sure how exactly we'll manage to get all that. What I do know is that things will not be dirt cheap, even though the AI overlords are really struggling to convince us that all will be fine. If indeed all our jobs will be automated, I fear that the future looks rather dystopian. The Tires TV series is your awesome recommendation of the week. Please don't forget to smash all the buttons, and see you in the next one.